Checker Book Publishing Group is an independent publisher of comics reprints, from newspaper strips to modern out-of-print titles and collections from Defunct publishers. History. Based in Miamisburg near Dayton, Ohio, Checker BPG was established in 2000 by Mark Thompson, Paul Dubuck in order to bring back into print dormant, unpublished, and underpublished serial comics and cartooning. Quote, Checker Comics. Checker Apex publisher. Mark Thompson, B. 1967-68. Graduated from Miami University with a business degree, and worked for a newspaper before starting his first comics company, Checker Comics, in 1997. Based in the Oregon District, Checker Comics published original works including Danger Ranger and Mutator before becoming one of many victim of the collapse of the comics speculator bubble in the late 1990s. Checker BPG, Inc. Checker Book Publishing was incorporated in 2001, and set to work collecting individual comics content into single collections, which are printed at an outside press, but shipped in-house after difficulties with outside distribution. Over the next 5 years, Checker published 43 titles. Sales between 2003 and 2004 doubled as Checker's output increased. Between 2004 and 2005, two of Checker's co-founders departed the company, and in 2010, Thompson decided to team up with Josh Blaylock of Devil's Due Publishing to create Devil's Due Digital Inc. reprints and rights. While Thompson was setting up Checker BPG, he compiled a wish list of 900 comic books and strips and began contacting people who owned the rights, investigating the works of Winsor McCay at the Cincinnati Public Library where McCay worked, as well as in New York. Thompson expected to obtain hard-to-reprint microfilm artwork, but instead discovered that the library owned bound original print copies, where original artwork is unavailable. As is the case with much of Checker Pring's output, print copies are the next best thing, and Thompson and his employees were, and are, able to scan the artwork, and spend, on average, a month removing signs of aging before taking around 3 months to actually compile and print each of their volumes, as well as publishing over a dozen volumes showcasing the works of Little Nemo in Slumberland creator Winsor McCay. Thompson was also able to negotiate with Ohio native Milton Caniff's nephew and executor Harry Guyton for the rights to Caniff's Steve Canyon. Typically, Checker is able to negotiate based on a cash advance and a percentage of sales, approaching the industry standard of 5%. Other reprint rights of older material secured by Checker include Dick Tracy, Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon, The Gold Key Star Trek comics, and Johnny Hart's B.C., as well as works by Theodore Seuss Geisel. Ultimately, Thompson hopes to branch out from straight reprints to again form imprints to publish original works, possibly catering to the Christian and alternative comic markets. Quote, Checker Apex role. Star Trek Volume 3 Checker BPG was set up to fill a perceived gap in the market, since Thompson felt that large book publishing houses do not completely understand comics, and the majority of comics publishers are not well versed in the complexities of the book trade. He therefore set out to bring comics back into print, with high production standards and worldwide distribution, to better appeal to a wider audience. Citing a combined experience of 15 years of book publicity and promotional experience in the fields of marketing and PR, Checker aims to consistently maintain a high profile in print and online advertising, running adverts in such noted comics and book sources as Wizard, Comics Buyer's Guide, Comics Retailer, Library Journal, publishes weekly and previews. Reproduction. Checker claims to be able to produce high-quality work from a variety of source materials, integral when trying to put together 100-year-old newspaper strips, but also important when such recent comics as Supreme. The return turned out to missing computer files and negatives. Checker prides itself on being able to work from older digital files, film, and even printed material, building digital files and, in many cases, restoring the original artwork for quality reproduction. Checker also promises to provide copies of the digital files they create to the original rights holders for the sake of posterity. Worldwide distribution. Checker BPG is represented in the USB distributor Midpoint Trade Books, who also deal with Warp Graphics' ElfQuest collections, which deals on their behalf with bookstores such as Barnes & Noble, Borders and Books A Million, while Diamond Book Distributors, FM International and Cold Cut Distribution deal with comic shop distribution, and some independent booksellers and libraries. In Great Britain, Europe and the former British Empire, including Australasia, Checker is represented by Turnaround Publisher Services, while Canada is stocked with Checker titles by Hush and House Publishing, who also represent graphic novel publisher NBM. Checker's in-house distribution network sells to Amazon.com, Buy.com and the Science Fiction Book Club, and also withholds foreign language rights to its licensed titles. Recently, Italian rights to Clive Barker's Hellraiser were awarded to Lexi Production of Terni, Italy. Published works. Checker BPG launched with its November 2001 release of Chuck Dixon's Alien Legion, Force Nomad, which Thompson called the perfect title to launch, with, quote, highlighting Checker's intentions to go back and rescue worthy comic book properties which lived and died in the era before the graphic novel format had taken hold, and to keep them available to the public in a durable, good-looking, complete format. Other early titles included Clive Barker's Hellraiser and his Eisner Award-nominated anthology, Tapping the Vein. Thompson also managed to negotiate the reprint rights to Topps Comics' X-Files comics, as well as a couple of volumes of Alan Moore's Awesome Comics work, 2 volumes of his Supreme, as well as the ultimately aborted Universe relaunching miniseries Judgment Day. Newspaper reprints. Checker BPEG's status in reprinting archive and long out-of-print material began in November 2003 with their first collection of Winsor McCay's early works, Max Allan Collins' Dick Tracy work, and the first volume of Milton Caniff's Steve Canyon, 1947. By summer 2007, 8 volumes of each were in print. Further volumes of McCay's works, including Dream of the Rarebit Fiend and his editorial works, have also seen print, alongside the first of 2 collection of his Little Nemo in Slumberland strips. See below. Dick Tracy =. When Chester Gould retired from writing and drawing the Dick Tracy newspaper strip in late 1977, it fell to crime writer Max Allan Collins to take up the writing reins, with Gould's assistant Rick Fletcher on art until his death in 1983, when Dick Locker took over. Until 1993, Checker BPG released their first of several volume of Collins Tracy works in November 2003 as Dick Tracy, The Collins Case Files Volume 1, and a second and third volume followed within a year, reprinted in the regular trade paperback format. Checker's volumes print 3 daily strips per page, with the Sunday strips in the first volume chopped up, losing the logo and Rogues Gallery headers. Some of these were subsequently included as separate extras in Volume 2. Volume 1 November 2003. Collects Max Allan Collins' Tracy writing debut, covering the rough period of January to December 1978. Volume 2. May 2004. Collects the Dick Tracy strips originally published during 1979. Volume 3. November 2004. Collects the strips from January 6, 1980 to January 17, 1981. Checker's press release announcing Volume 3 claimed that the first two volumes had met with across-the-board positive response from critics to consumers, quoting favorable reviews from Suspended Animation and Booklist, although restating their intention that strips from 1978 to 1989 are to see reprint in multiple volumes. No further volumes have been solicited or released. This could simply mean that subsequent volumes are on indefinite hold while Checker focuses its efforts elsewhere. Flash Gordon equals. Between June 2004 and January 2007, Checker reprinted in 7 volumes the complete Flash Gordon Sunday strips of Alex Raymond. These strips had been previously collected in color by Kitchen Sink Press, but had been out of print for several years. Volume 1, June 2004. Collects Raymond's earliest Sunday strips starting from the first, printed on January 7, 1934. Volume 2, August 2004. Collects strips from 1935 and 1936. Volume 3, March 2005. Collects the pages printed between October 25, 1936 and August 1, 1937. Volume 4, October 2005. Collects strips printed between 1938 and 1940. Volume 5, November 2005. Collects The Ice Kingdom of Mongo, Power Men of Mongo, and The Fall of Ming, 1940 to 1941. Volume 6, December 2006. Collects the pages printed from August 1941 to May 1943. Volume 7, January 2007. Collects the final strips from mid-1943 until the final Raymond issue from February 1945. Little Nemo in Slumberland equals. In summer 2007, Checker announced a 2-volume hardback edition of Winsor McCay's landmark strip Little Nemo in Slumberland, claiming it to provide the most comprehensive collection of the series ever produced. Volume 1, collecting the strips published between 1905 and 1909, was solicited as being in full color, while Volume 2, scheduled for winter 2007, was to contain a mixture of color and black and white strips, due to difficulties in obtaining source materials. In an August 2007 interview with Newsarama's Michael Laura, Checker publisher Mark Thompson noted that, while there have been several attempts to collect Little Nemo from multiple publishers, the series has never been collected in its entirety. The strip initially appeared in the New York Herald on October 15, 1905, and ran until April 23, 1911 before switching to the New York American a week later, and finishing in 1913, before enjoying a brief resurgence from 1924 to 1927. Thompson assured Laura that Checker intended to collect everything. The 1920s series is going to be collected comprehensively, including a rare McKay precursor which ran in the Cincinnati Enquirer in 1903, entitled Tales of the Jungle Imps. At the time, Thompson noted that the second volume would not contain full color, since Checker only had access to approximately 60 to 75% of the strips in full color, and the remainder are in black and white. However, Volume 2 failed to see print by its scheduled date. and on 10 December 2007, an open letter from Thompson was released to various websites. It read in part, Checker's initial plans for Little Nemo included a significant amount of original newspapers we have been acquiring over the past 2 years. However, in our marketing and press release we warned fans that due to the rarity of this material, this edition was originally planned to contain black and white versions of some of the late Winsor McCay Little Nemo run from 1924 to 1926. Well, as luck would have it, just prior to print dates earlier in the fall we discovered the final pieces we needed to accomplish the collection of the entire 1924 to 1926 periods in color. This has extended the production by a few months, but we hope you understand. Other collections. Checker BPG does not only publish old works, nor does it focus solely on newspaper reprints. In addition to producing a collection of Johnny Hart's B.C. and 2 volumes of early works by Theodore Seuss Geisel, Checker have also published, and republished, works from defunct companies such as Awesome Comics, Epic Comics, Gold Key Comics, Malibu Comics and Tops Comics. These include the highly acclaimed, but previously uncollected, Supreme work produced by legendary comics creator Alan Moore for Rob Liefeld. 3 volumes of Clive Barker's Hellraiser anthology, featuring work by Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean, Mike Mignola, Alex Ross, Larry Wachowski and others. 3 volumes each of Epic's Alien Legion and Topps X-Files and 5 volumes of Gold Key's Star Trek comics as well as Will Jacobs and Gerard Jones' The Trouble with Girls newspaper strips. Winsor McCay . In his overview of books featuring to work of Winsor McCay for the 100th anniversary of Little Nemo, Taylor Jessen of Animation World magazine damns Checker's McCay volumes with faint praise, calling the Winsor McCay early works series abundant but erratically curated. Much of such criticism is due to the lack of good art sources, relying on glorified photocopies of 100-year-old newspapers rarely produces perfect artwork that Checker has to deal with when producing such volumes. Not everyone is critical, either. Newsarama poster, Duncan Hines, is critical of the crap image quality of Checker's Supreme volumes, but writes that their other reprints of Winsor McCay's early work and their early works of Dr. Seuss HCS are beautiful. Quote, Flash Gordon . Similar problems have been encountered with Checker's reprints of Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon Sunday strips. Artist and librarian Derek K. Badman's review of the first 3 volumes praised Checker's decision to reprint in rather large-sized hardcovers. Unlike their microscopic reprints of Milton Caniff's Steve Canyon on glossy paper, he reserves his disappointment for the quality of reproduction, which he finds occasionally muddy and often off-register. Quote, he does not blame Checker, although his assumption that finding originals or cleaning up the art would be extensive and costly, and therefore did not occur, seems slightly at odds with Checker's own claims, albeit in direct reference to the works of McCay, to spend around 4 months cleaning and compiling each book they publish, and their website's assertion that they utilize only the highest quality specifications and materials on press, and proprietary pre-press techniques, using high-end technology combined with experienced designers to accomplish the meticulous restoration that each project demands. Quote, ironically, since Thompson has gone on record as stating that, while during the course of Checker's process his black and white comics can be colorized, he likes to remain faithful to how they originally appeared. Badman writes, Having seen some of Raymond's art in black and white, I almost wish for a black and white reproduction to better show off his art. His careful use of spot blacks, often eschewing them altogether, means his uncolored ink work sits rather lightly on the page. But without the color one can clearly see the line work and how subtly it creates shape and depth. Format equals. The formats chosen by Checker in which to present their output have come in for some criticism from relatively insignificant comments that, for example, the Flash Gordon volumes are an unhelpful size and shape to be easily stored on a bookcase, although that format suits the source material. To more pointed criticisms of the sizing of the strips collected in Checker's Dick Tracy and Steve Canyon volumes. Christopher Mills, reviewing the first Dick Tracy volume for Guns in the Gutters, generally praises the decent reproduction of the original strips, but notes that Checker place only 3 dailies on each page, when there's clearly room for more. Doubly odd when one considers that the comparable Steve Canyon volumes reprint 4 per page, and that the Sunday strips are chopped up to fit the format, losing the logo and Rogues Gallery headers. Quote, these parts of the strips, removed to allow them to fit the book format, were, in Volume 2, included as an extra feature. On the flip side of the strips per page argument, Checker's collections of Steve Canyon have received criticism for putting more strips on the page. Newsarama poster, Comic Reader, writes that the format for the Steve Canyon reprints is wrong. It should have been landscape to allow the strips to be reprinted at a larger size. The dailies are often quite small. Newsarama's DJ Sloofus agrees, stating that one can barely even read the Canyon reprints, as Checker is cramming way too much copy on each page. Quote, Johanna Draper Carlson, of Comics Worth Reading, writes, putting 4 daily strips on a page means they're reproduced at roughly the same size of today's strips. That can make text-heavy panels hard to read, and some of the art detail is lost at the smaller size. She does however say that the small reproduction size does allow for a lot of content to be collected in each volume, making the books a substantial read. Supreme. Artist Rick Veitch was quite clear in his opinion of Checker Supreme. The Return. Upon receiving a complimentary copy, as one of the artists who drew flashback sequences, he wrote, while I'm happy this material is seeing print, I have many of the same problems with this volume that I had on the previous one. Supreme. The story of the year. For starts, the reproduction of the interior art is horrendous. He mitigated his criticism by pointing out that Thompson and Checker were working from poor JPEGs. So Veitch, know what Thompson, was up against, and I'm sure he did the best he could. But the final product looks muddy, dark and just plain lousy. Quote, Veitch also criticizes Checker's decision to devote the blurb on both Supreme volumes to Rob Liefeld, as if he actually had much of anything to do with the work inside the book. Liefeld's contribution was as publisher, one who was often late with payments, cover artist and inker of about 3 pages worth of figures, in perpetuating the illusion that he was creatively involved in Supreme to any great degree. Checker slights the efforts of Gil Kane, Jim Starlin, Ian Churchill and myself who actually drew full stories for the book. Veitch also notes that the book's biggest failing is that the final issue of the story was never produced, and notes archly that Checker's tome takes care of that little problem by ignoring it completely and just tacking the end on the last story. In summary, Veitch concludes that the volumes are sloppy, to say the least, but unless you want to hunt down the back issues, They are the only game in town. In addition, he notes that here are no royalties being paid to the creators for either of the Supreme reprint volumes. Quote, further reviews and criticism. In addition to some disappointment regarding the format and layout of some of their newspaper strip reprints, some of Checker's titles have drawn criticism directed towards the company's stated high-quality standards. In particular, critics have focused on art reproduction quality, citing, for example, a faded look in some of the Dick Tracy volumes where ink appears not to have been accurately applied, or the aforementioned quality of reproduction on Flash Gordon Volume 1, which is said to be occasionally muddy and often off-register, some reviewers going so far as to allege more generally that the quality of Checker's reproductions is very poor. Quote, indeed, Publishers Weekly's review of Flash Gordon Volume 1 went so far as to note that he reproduction quality is fairly rough. Panels and colors are frequently muddy and blurry. Quote, this statement, however, demonstrated the diligence with which Checker treats its output, as evidenced by Mark Thompson's personal swift rebuttal of the PW comment, writing that Publishers Weekly had necessarily only had access to an advance review copy, subsequent to which Checker chose to delay the publication of the collection and revamp the book format and design to better reflect its original published format. The end book is something wholly different than what we provided to the editorial staff at Publishers Weekly. Quote, indeed, the book as published was well received, with subsequent reviews writing, for example, that the volume featured pages of a high quality, while the images are large and the colors are amazing. Others note that future volumes improve upon the printing quality also. Inc. 19's review of Volume 4, for example, notes that by this point, the color is clean but subdued, and the high-quality strips are mirrored by being printed in quality books. Customer complaints. Checker Book Publishing Group currently has an F rating from the Better Business Bureau. Cited reasons for this rating include a failure to respond to 4 complaints filed against the business, and 3 serious complaints filed against the business. The BBB defines a serious complaint as one that indicates a significant ethical failure by the business, or a material failure with regard to the business products, services that resulted in significant consumer injury. According to Checker, many of these complaints are due to the split from Diamond Comic Distribution Inc., in which Diamond had shown a rapidly deteriorating capability to process inbound projects and publications, which resulted in nothing less than a complete inability to sell Checker product. Coming soon, a collection of Richard F. Outcault's Yellow Kid, often referred to as one of, if not the earliest comic strips published, is said to be forthcoming, and volumes reprinting work originally produced for now defunct comics company Croscan are likely to ultimately see prints from Checker. Croscan. After Croscan filed for bankruptcy in 2004, Disney, already interested in licensing some properties, acquired Croscan's assets, and began to slowly decide how best to exploit their new properties. In December 2006, it was announced that Checker Book Publishing Group and Walt Disney Publishing have announced a licensing agreement under which Checker will reprint original Croscan Comics Company material, focusing particularly on the uncollected issues of Sojourn, Sigil, Way of the Rat and Scion. These were to be produced using the original Croscan digital files for better reproduction, and around half the original 9 solicited were released as of January 2008, after Thompson told Newsarama in July 2007 that pre-orders have been good through Diamond, but that Checker was a bit behind on the release schedule we originally announced, focusing on the uncollected issues. Checker's collections do not start at the beginning of the various series, starting at between Volume 3 and Volume 6, and following directly from the previously published volumes released by Croscan. Thompson stated that Checker was, as of July 2007, strongly considering more collections, and we will probably approach Disney with a proposal, qualifying this 2 weeks later as hopefully ultimately producing catch-up omnibus collections that have issues collected in one place. To complement the new volumes for storyline completeness. Quote, Thompson's goal, as in all of Checker's work, is to re-establish a trade schedule of the optimum material Croscan produced so it is not lost to the ages. Volumes of The Path and Negation, delayed for over a year, are presently due for publication in March 2008. Notes. Official website. Comic list. Checker BPG.